What did it feel like to have your finger cut off?
Oh boy, it was pretty rough. I as soon as it happened, there it is. I said, I can't believe I've crossed to the side of the line. That was like the first thing in my mind was, I absolutely can't believe I just stepped on the side of the line that I can't come back from. That was the first thought in my mind. Because I realized I had cut my pinky nearly completely off. It was just, the cut went through, my hand was in a fist, so it went down the side of my hand like this, so that's why I have a pretty severe scar in my palm. The cut goes down like to here. So the saw blade went right through my knuckle, all the way through and because my finger was bunched up, it didn't get to this part. So it didn't cut the skin right in there. So as soon as the accident occurred, I felt the tip of my pinky touching inside here on my, not something I wanted, not something I was reaching for, because my pinky wasn't connected to my bone structure
Yeah.
anymore, so it had fallen into my hand, and I felt like if you just like put your palm out and touch the inside part of your thumb right there, and you realize that that's the tip of your pinky, and you're not trying to
Wow.
make it. You can't even make a touch there if you wanted to, and I said, "Oh my God!" And I grabbed my hand like this, and I was like, I can't fix this. It's like the first thing I thought of is like, I can't fix this. I can't believe I just stepped on the side of the line. Is really what I was thinking. And then I went like this and I looked quick and I saw two red spots with two white dots on each side. So it was like a bullseye on both sides. That was the flesh and the little skinny bone in between. The bone is only, it's like the size of a chopstick. Like if you could imagine, like that's what the doctor described to me. He said, that's about how thick your bone is right there. It's like a bamboo chopstick.
Wow.
And he said, I just assumed when I was at the doctor, because after all was said and done, my pinky is about a centimeter shorter than the other
Oh,
fingers.
wow.
And I said, "What did you have to clean up the surfaces? I thought it would have been a clean." He goes, "No. When fresh, healthy bone gets cut, it doesn't. Very rarely does it cut perfectly. You would assume because the saw blades at so many thousand RPMs, it's going to be a clean cut." He said it kind of explodes it, and he used the scenario of a bamboo chopstick. He says, like, if you snap a bamboo chopstick, that's what happens to your bones. He says you end up having to lose a lot from both surfaces to try and join them, so as little as possible. And
Did you feel pain immediately?
no, my adrenaline was running so much. I was like, okay. The way the accident happened, and I sent you pictures, and you could see that I was ripping a dado, or a rabbit, really. I was ripping a rabbit to make a bullnose for the end of a long melamine shelf. I was going to put an oak edge on it to go weaving way back. My cat needed to be euthanized. She had mouth cancer. He had mouth cancer, so we had to euthanize my cat, and it was like $400 or $500 in Manhattan. So my friend, who's the veterinarian, said, "Just I'll do this, and I need you to build me a shelf." So I was like, "Okay." So because Louis got mouth cancer, I lost my pinky. So
It's the most expensive site, most expensive trade ever.
and so it was just my idiocy. It just happened what I was working on. And I look up at the clock. I had a meeting with a student at 6 o'clock. I had 5 minutes to 6. I was like, let me at least move this project along. I'll cut the rabbit in the end of this bullnose. It was like a 5 foot long piece of 1x3 oak. And I cut one side of the rabbit, and I was getting the saw set up to cut the other side of the rabbit while it was running. That was my mistake. I had never locked the fence, and I was in the process of raising the blade up, and it kissed the piece of wood that was just on the back side of the blade. I was raising it up to see how deep, and I was raising the blade up like this to see how high it would come to meet the other slice in the rabbit that had already been installed in the wood. And I raised it up too far, and it grabbed the wood and shot the wood through the saw and hit me in my forearm. And so my adjustment hand that was raising the blade up got blasted by the 4 foot piece of 1x2. And so I got blasted by that piece of wood at the exact same time my hand went like this, and I bumped into the blade. And I hadn't locked the fence, so everything moved in the big boom, and my hand hit the blade. I felt my hand, like if you were to like tap your wrist on like a buffing wheel, and you'd feel your hand get yanked like that.
Yeah.
I had fallen down, and the blade kind of entered here first, and then pulled my hand in like that. So like I
Wow.
felt my hand get like stubbed on the blade like that, as if like I stubbed my toe. And so now I'm blasted here by the long piece of wood that jammed through the saw, and blood was squirting out of a small artery on my forearm, and my pinky was in my palm, and I looked at this first, and then I felt my pinky in my palm. I was like, what's going on here? And in an instant, both arms were incapacitated to some extent. I thought I broke my forearm because the wood hit so hard right here, and the blood was squirting out of the little, you saw in the picture I sent you, it's just like a little imprint of the end of the board. The blood here squirted about 5 or 6 times and stopped. And then I said, all right, I can move my hand, my arm's not broken. Let me tend to this. And so I grabbed a bandana and I wrapped this after I noticed it was like sliced and everything. And I was like, don't look at it too much because I don't want to faint. I'm here alone. And I reached around. I had to shut my exhaust fan off. I had to shut the lights off. I had to, of course, shut the saw off and go upstairs the whole time like, okay, what do I need? I need my keys. I need my phone. This might be a one-way trip. So I grabbed everything I needed and went upstairs. And there's a doctor office upstairs. This guy I used to be friends with, we got into a fight, so we no longer talk. And so I had to go into his office. I go, Dave? He goes, yeah, what's up? And like we were kind of like frenemies at that point. And he goes, I cut my hand with the saw. He goes, all right, let's see it. And I opened it up. He goes, all right, you'll be all right. He goes, they can fix that. And he said, he was like trying to keep me calm. He said, they're going to be able to fix that. Don't worry, they'll be able to fix that. And then with that, one of my other closest friends walked by and he came in. So the three of us used to be like really tight buddies. Now it's just two of us against one. But at that moment, all that was out the window, right? We were all just hanging out.
Yeah.
And they're both named Dave. So Dr. Dave calls the ambulance, and in a few minutes, the ambulance pulls up. But the whole time, Dr. Dave is saying, you're going to be fine. They're going to be able to fix it. They're going to be fine. And then the ambulance comes. They take me in the ambulance. Then later on, I said to Dave, the lawyer, my other friend, I said, what did Dave say when I walked out of the office? He goes, it was funny. He kept being so reassuring to you, saying, they're going to fix it. They're going to fix it to calm you down. He goes, the second you walked out of the office and you got in the ambulance, he looked at me. He goes, they're just going to scissor that off and put a stitch over the stump. He'll be home tonight at 6. He goes, he'll be home in a few hours.
Oh,
but he was telling me they're going to fix it. They're going to fix it. And then he turns to him and goes, yeah, they're just going to cut it off and just put a couple stitches over the stump. He'll be fine. He'll be home in a few hours.
Oh, my word.
But I ended up going, so when you ask about pain, I didn't really feel any pain at that point because I was under a lot of adrenaline, I suppose. And when I got to the hospital, they wanted to wash it out. And it was it was cut severely. Like they were like, it might, if the piece dies before we get a chance to sew it on, it might not stay. And so they broke out this little machine to check. It magnifies the sound of blood in capillaries, wishing through capillaries. And so it's like a little sonogram machine. And he put it on the tip of my finger and we weren't getting anything. He goes, yeah. He goes, it's not looking good. And he kept moving it around. And then eventually he got like a little spot where you could hear whoosh, 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 whoosh. He goes, all right, you're getting some blood activity in your finger. He goes, it's a fighting chance we'll be able to keep it. And so the nurses said, we have to wash it out. I got there at about 6:30 to the hospital, and it wasn't until like midnight that the doctors finally came over and said, okay, we're going to wash it out now. And they put my hand in a box, like an open plastic bucket. It's a square bucket, and they washed it out with saline. And the pain was so severe at that point. I didn't look.
So the washing.
Yeah, because it was a squirt bottle. It was a squirt bottle, so like the pressure of the saline squirting on my hand was excruciating to the point where I fainted. But I was laying down, so it didn't matter. I just kind of checked out for about 10 seconds and came to. And my buddy Dave was with me. I said, did I just faint? He said, yeah, you just fainted.
Oh, my goodness. How old were you?
This happened 13 years ago. So I was 43.
You're 70 now, so...
Yep.
Oh, wait.
It happened when I was 43. I felt so stupid. That was the other thing. I was like, I can't believe I'm like on this side of like this event and there's nothing I can do to go backwards. And I was apologizing to everybody at the hospital. I was like, I feel so stupid. I'm sorry I cut my hand on the table saw. I mean, isn't there more important things to deal with than some idiot that doesn't practice safety techniques? That's really what I apologize to everybody, the x-ray technician and the nurses. And they're like, don't worry, it happens every day. They're like, you're like one of 10 people that came in today. It doesn't matter about it. Like with like construction injuries is what they were kind of alluding to.
Sure.
They said construction injuries happen all the time. They said, you're lucky. They said, usually it's 2.5 fingers in a bag. They said, it's like 2 full fingers in a Ziploc bag and 1 finger mangled beyond repair. They said, that's usually what the accidents we see on table saws and circular saws from construction sites up here.
Yeah, the stats I found, it's 12 amputations a day on table saws alone in the U.S. That's every 2 hours, one woodworker loses part of their hand to a table saw.
And it's
And that's the ones that come into the ER.
yeah.
Like that's what's reported. I'm sure there's more.
Yeah, I've cut my hand so many times that I never went to the ER. When I was a little kid, I would always cut my hand on the bandsaw, and I've just done some videos on the bandsaw, which you helped me with. The bandsaw video, where I even said at one point, I said, I've cut my fingers lots. I never cut anything off. I never cut a piece off. I've only just like inserted the blade into my fingertips and taken them out, instant. Or a couple times I got caught on the big blades when I always say those bigger blades with the bigger teeth count or the smaller teeth count where it's like a 4 TPI. Those will suck you in. Those will like grab you and pull you. And the little ones, it's just like rubbing on like a sanding belt. And if you put some pressure behind it, like let's say you're pushing on a piece of scrap on the table, the way I've gotten cut, maybe 3 or 4 times in my life, same stupid accident, a piece of debris gets caught in the blade line in the tabletop, where you insert the blade in to change it. A piece of material gets caught in that, and you go to flick it or kick it or break it out, and you break it out and you jam your thumb into the saw blade. I haven't done that in a long time, but I did that a lot when I was a kid just because I was an idiot. But all those times I got injured on the bandsaw, I would run up to my mother. She'd take me to the hospital, give me stitches, and then come home. I started just using crazy glue because I'm like, this isn't enough for me to go wait in the emergency room for 6 hours. I could just
Right.
I've already done this 8-9 times already. I could just hold the cut closed, put crazy glue on it, and then try not to bang it for a couple days until it starts to coagulate, and then I'm in the clear. And that was really
And that was before they had spray activator.
It's true.
Have you ever done that? You ever put? I've heard of people say that they put super glue and then spray activator on it.
And then it burns.
That sounds terrible.
No, my technique, and I've talked about it somewhere over the years, is I take CA glue and I put it on like the top of like a pen cap standing upright, just so it's like on the top of a jar. So I have a puddle of CA glue, and then I run a thread through it, and then I take that thread and I wrap it around. So the thread has the CA glue on it, and it basically becomes like a really small, tight, strong butterfly right across the cut. So if it's on a fingertip and I could wrap it, I'll wrap the thread that's soaked in CA glue around the whole cut, because then it won't come off. If it's like in the middle someplace, I'll try and put a couple of threads across it. But I make them long so that you have much more sticking power.
That's crazy. Yeah. So I remember you saying you started using the bandsaw when you were 7.
Mm-hmm. 6 or 7, like that.
How old were you when you started using the table saw?
Well, we always had a radial arm saw growing up. We never really had a table saw. So I didn't really, this is stupid, I didn't start using a proper table saw, like a cabinet saw, until I was like 22 or 3. But prior to that, everything I ever did from like the age of like 10 on was with a radial arm saw, like the way Dusty uses, or the way
Norm.
Yeah, just a straight up. So I always thought every time I built a shop growing up, I was like, oh, I need a radial arm saw. Now I got like 6 radial arm saws that I have no use for, because I learned to use the table saw for everything.
So you cut your finger up when you were 43, and you started using the table saw when you were 22, 23. So you had over 20 years of experience with the table saw before you had a life-changing.
And then 10 years of
it.
experience with a radial arm saw, which is 50,000 times more dangerous, in my opinion.
Oh, wow.
A radial arm saw will just walk right across your hand. It's like, there's no, like, because you have that free saw blade that'll just fly. If it binds up, it'll fly across. If it's, if you're trying to cut something with like a little bit of a whisper of a cut, and, it could walk. My dad would always say, be careful of the blade walking on the wood. That's what he would call it, which would mean riding over the wood and not cutting it, because it'll run at you as fast as you could possibly imagine.
Yeah, so I think that's would you say that it's not, like if you were to take 2 camps of people, beginners and then experienced users, who's more at risk of getting hurt at the table saw?
I would probably say experienced users, but there are also the beginners. There are also the beginners that I watch that don't have a healthy fear of the machine.
Right.
I think that's a smaller group but I think a small group of people that just don't understand the power they're messing with, and then a bigger group of confident people like me that could just think like, I could adjust my blade up into the wood while it's running on the back side of the blade, and then it runs through it like an idiot, and it hits me, and then I throw my hand in the blade. There's a lot of mistakes that I make all the time that I'm like, if I didn't have balls of steel, I wouldn't do that.
You don't have balls. I know the truth.
But it's funny. I did a stool video. I made like another little wooden stool, and I had the blade beveled at like maybe 7 or 8 degrees like this, and then I took a disc and I put the disc into up against the fence, so the disc is vertical in the air, flat part of the stool top against the fence, the bottom part against the bevel, and I was doing this, and I basically cut a big bevel off on that piece of wood. And in my video, I was like, I wouldn't do this if this wasn't a saw stop, but since it's a saw stop, I could take a chance. And they yelled at me. They're like, we don't want to encourage people to like walk a tightrope if they don't have to. It
Right.
shouldn't be done that way. And I was like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think in my mind, there's that small group of beginners who don't have any respect for the machine. And then there's the other extreme of that, which is a larger group of people who have been using it for decades and have maybe become so comfortable that they've become dangerous because they don't have any like they've lost the respect they should have.
Yeah.
So it's like both groups don't have the respect they should have. One's out of ignorance and the other is just out of complacency and maybe
Right.
some arrogance.
You sent
of
me
like,
a video of somebody who's got extreme amount of experience, and he was talking about safety tips on the table saw. And I said his biggest mistake is he doesn't have a riving knife on that blade. I won't use a table saw if I go to like a makerspace. I won't use there was a time when I didn't care. I didn't realize the importance of it. I'll be honest with you. The table saw I got injured on never had a riving knife, but that wasn't the impetus of my
Wasn't the
incident.
cause.
But
Yeah.
I realized soon thereafter how important it is and how dangerous working on a table saw without it can be. I won't go near it. I just won't turn on a table saw that doesn't have a riving knife. And if I'm in someone's shop and they're like, like I just work with George, but George is safety conscious. Every time he changed the blade, he put in the proper riving knife, whether it was for the knife that was attached to the exhaust port on top or whether it was just one that stood alone. But in some shops, they're just like, you don't need a knife. Don't be a pussy. I'm like, no, I'm not going to. It's important. I don't
It
need
is
to
very-
get.
it is-
I don't need to be, castrated.
Well, yeah, I think that's tip number one that I'm leading with is use a riving knife. And if your machine doesn't have one, here's this video by Frank where he shows you how to make a splitter for your
Yeah.
throat. What's interesting about that video I sent you was, according to Steve Ramsey, he has the most views of any woodworker on YouTube.
Who's that?
Matthias.
Oh, probably. I agree with that. Yeah.
That's what Ramsey says. Is and I have no reason to fact check Ramsey.
He was getting his marble machines were getting million. In the beginning, he started doing marble machines. That's how he started. If you go back, his early videos are all marble machines, and then he started making gears for the marble machines, and then he just started doing everything. But Matthias's early marble machine videos were like cat videos. When YouTube first started.
Yeah. So it's just fascinating. That video had 1 million plus views, I think. He's the most viewed, at least at the time that Steve made that comment. And he's doing and the guy in there has some, he's using the push stick. He's using the push stick on the side going after the blade. I was like, oh my God. I didn't even pick up that he didn't have a riving knife. You picked that up. That's cool.
Yeah. On a homemade table saw, of course.
Yeah.
Might have been one of his
man.
homemade table saws.
So the mistake that you made was a couple of things. That it was, first of all, it was making adjustments while the saw's running,
Yep. Biggest mistake.
and then second, not locking down your fence, so that
I
compounded it.
I was laying in the hospital bed thinking to myself, like going over the anatomy of the cut. So the blade was up only 3/8 of an inch, maybe a half inch, not even. And the cut would have been about a half inch from the fence. So I'm laying in the hospital bed going, how could my hand get that close to the blade? Like it was only up a little bit and only a little bit away from the fence. Like to get my hand in there would have been really awkward. Like if anything, I would have just cut the tips of my fingers, right? Because the fence would have been a protecting wall. And then David Welder, my assistant at the time, I was on the phone with him telling him what happened. And he's the one who took all those pictures that I sent you. He took those pictures on his phone. It was right when the iPhone came out, so everyone was taking pictures with their iPhone. And he sent me those pictures. And I said to him, I go, he was in the shop when I was at the hospital. I was like, is the fence locked? He goes, no, it's not. I go, was it locked? I go, did you play with it? He goes, no. I came in and it's about 5 inches away from the blade. I was like, so I must not have locked the fence. I should have. And if I did lock the fence, I wouldn't have gotten the cut. I would have just gotten a blast from the wood, and I would have been like, "Oh, that sucks." I would have banged my head on the. I probably would have hit my hand on the table. Maybe the tip of my fingernail would have got cut by the blade. But the fact that the wood and everything, like in a fury, everything like the fence just moved over enough in my hand to go boom.
That's pretty crazy. I posted a thing on my community tab asking people to share their dumbest mistakes, and a couple of people mentioned not locking down their fence. I've never not locked down my fence, and I thought that was crazy. And I was talking to this no-name beginner YouTuber, Keith Johnson, and he, as a joke, he said that he's like, yeah, last week I forgot to lock down his fence. It scared, like nothing happened, but it scared him. And I was like, wow. I mean, Keith is one of the most meticulous woodworkers I know. And even he forgot to lock down his fence last week.
It happens. It happens. Especially to YouTubers, because what happens is you're worrying about the shot. You're worrying about the camera.
Yeah.
How many times you compose a shot and you forget to hit record? Because you think like, yeah, I've done it a few times, and that's why sometimes when it's super important, I'll have 2 or 3 cameras going. I always get a GoPro. If it's something I can't recreate, I'll have a GoPro just rolling, just in case there's a mercy shot, just in case it's all I get. But if it's the Sony, I make sure and then I'm in the middle of doing it, and I look back and the Sony just shuts off. I'm like, fuck. I composed the shot, but I didn't hit record. And like I know it's like, hey, if you want me to, I'm here. And then it's just like, okay, you don't need me. I'm just going to turn off. And then I'm like, oh damn, I forgot to turn the.
I was watching some Laura videos last night, and I was like, oh, the things I could do and the joy I would have if I had a cameraman.
Oh,
because filming yourself is not fun. Because everything takes 3 times as long.
Yeah, me and Rob were talking about that. I'm going to buy a Ronin so we can because we're going to do the walk through the new house. So we're going to buy a Ronin so that it's a little bit, so it looks good. And also it flows well. So Rob's going to be my cameraman when we do the walk through the house.
That's great. Yeah. I hate, the last big build video that I did on this table, it was a very easy build. It should have taken me 2 days. It took me 10 days because of filming it. It just like setting up all the shot. Okay, well, let me get a wide shot. Let me get a close-up shot. Oh, the battery's dead. Let me clean this. Let me change out this lens. And it should have taken me 2 days to build this table, and it took me 2 weeks, 10 days.
I usually produce a video once a week, unless it's a long-term video, like the boat, which is now going on almost 1 year.
Yeah. They just, to do it how I do it, which is dumb, is just like try to make it as cinematic as possible and mess with lighting, and it's I don't know. I've thought of just like trying one with just my phone just to see if anyone notices that.
Right.
It's lower quality. It's just a lot of work.
What do you shoot on?
I have a Sony A6600 that I shoot in like a custom flat profile. I'm a big color guy, so I have like a flat profile, and then I have a LUT that I made to color correct everything. I want an A7S III for the 10-bit dynamic range, but one day I'll save up and get one. But I used to. I have a gimbal, and I used to put the Sony on a gimbal to get on my B-roll. Now I just use my iPhone for the B-roll, and it has decent stabilization built in. Something, but
the iPhone is amazing.
I've just found
shoot so many B-rolls clips on my iPhone.
I got to where I was just making, my standards are so stupid high. I was just making it so hard for myself. So for talking head, I'll use my Sony. And I'll get some if I need really, really, really close-up shots, I'll use that. But a lot of it, I'll just use the iPhone. I have a GoPro, and I just found again. I've lost it. I just found it, so I'm gonna start experimenting with it. I want to get one of those 360 cams that you have, because that'd be
they're fun to play with.
Experiment with.
You got to be.
But what I really need,
everything starts looking the same. You start playing with that globy trick, and you just keep.
Yeah, I need I need to find some 16-year-old high school kid who wants a part-time job after school, who will come and like want to intern for a YouTuber. That's what I need. It's just or my sons in like 4 more years, they could probably be able to do it. But
Oh, so getting back to my injury, I showed you a picture of 4 months out with the pins still in my hand. The pins were in my hands for 6 months because the bones weren't
Wow.
fusing. The bones weren't coming
Yeah.
to each other, and the doctor says if the bones don't fuse, you might have to remove your finger. So there was like the jury was out, even though, and then I started going to physical therapy and nothing was really working. They kept checking my chart. They're like, you should be able to move your hand. They connected everything, but I'm showing you now. I can't. That's as much as I could do.
I didn't realize that it was shorter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because like that little bone, that joint
Yeah.
right there.
So you have no
Surprised.
feeling?
I do
No
on the
feeling in it?
inside where the blood, where the saw didn't cut through. On the outside, I don't have any feeling. So out there, it feels like my hand's got like CA glue all over it right there. So from like
So are you
from like here
still-
up, I can still injure myself and not know it.
So when you're at the table saw now, are you on alert, or have you fallen back into the complacent mode?
No, I'm definitely much more on alert. I use my push sticks now much more often. And a lot of people notice me do that flip trick where I cut halfway and pull the wood out and flip it again. Like I very rarely push wood completely through the saw. I have a thing with myself where, unless it's a fine cut and I want to make sure I don't have like a meeting match in the middle, because sometimes you could flip a piece of wood and have like a meeting line in the middle where the two saw cuts meet. But if I'm just mostly ripping wood in preparation to, if I'm breaking it down in preparation for hand planing it or whatever, I'll just do a flip cut. I never ever put my hand past the arbor. That's like a rule I have now. My hand never goes past the arbor. And in my mind, if my hand never goes past the arbor, I won't ever get pulled into the blade. And but I
Wow.
also now
So-
I'm only using a saw stop now.
Yeah, one of the a friend recently told me a story where it wasn't a saw stop, so this was like in the 80s, but he had kickback, and the piece came back, hit him in the teeth. The next thing he knows, he wakes up, he's on the ground, it knocked him out.
Whoa.
He's in a pool of blood, saw still running. He doesn't know how long he was out.
Oh.
But a saw stop can't prevent that kind of kickback, obviously. You know, so
No,
it was
well-
like
Well, they
he
do
did
have.
something-
They
he
do
did something
have.
stupid.
They do have kickback, anti-kickback claws and stuff, which I took them off
Right.
because they drive me nuts.
Me
But the
too.
anti-kickback claws are usually on all these saws, and
Yeah.
I did get a kickback once on the saw that damaged this finger. You can't really tell, but you can't see it at all because it's kind of it happened. I pulled my fingernail back and the cut was under my fingernail. I was doing that where I flip a piece of wood and I flip it, and the blade was dull, and it kept riding up and then snapping down and riding up and snapping down, and it was just my own operator error. I was being aggressive, and the wood kicked back, and I cut my fingernail in my nail bed from the end of the piece of wood, not from the blade. But the trauma did cause the blade to snap down, so it did kick in the brake because the saw knew something happened. It was a heavy kickback that kicked me basically in the fingertip from about 4 inches away from the blade.
Wow.
And so I got the full
Yeah.
girth, and so it ripped my fingernail back and peeled all
Oh.
the skin in my nail bed. So it was pretty painful. Way back in my Instagram, I guess it was like just before the pandemic, maybe 19. You see my hand all covered with blood and my fingertip is bandaged up. I said, "This looks worse than it is." That was that day, whatever that was. It was June of
Wow.
18 or 19.
Yeah,
fun
because I
times.
imagine a lot of people buy saw stops and they think, "Oh, I'm good, I'm safe."
Yeah,
It's like,
they're
no, like,
extremely
you
powerful.
can
They're great saws.
You can, yeah, especially if I got the 3 horsepower, but you can still hurt yourself. I mean, you're not going to cut your hand off, but you can still get hurt. You
Like,
know?
did you see? I think it's a girl because everybody always, you can't tell if she's all bundled up or he's bundled up, making a wooden disc on the table saw, and they go to grab the top of it, and it pulls the hand right into the blade.
Yeah, I think her
That's-
name's Alyssa. She's letting me use that clip.
Yeah, that is a very, very stupid mistake
She-
that I could have made. I could have easily made that mistake because you're not realizing that wood. That basically you're grabbing a piece of wood that's getting sucked right towards the blade.
Yep.
Yeah, 'cause you're grabbing the edge of a
she
circle.
actually mentioned you. She said she called you out. She goes, "Just don't show the video of Jimmy freehanding a circle on the table saw." Like, did he do that?
I did that on Instagram a few weeks ago. I had to cut a circle, and I was like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I was like, oh, let me just freehand it, and then I was like, oh, let me film it.
Oh, great. Yeah, she actually mentioned you. She actually mentioned that. So
Well, I figured
There's another-
the way that was set up, I figured if it gets, I was kind of standing to the side. If it binds up and shoots out, it'll just shoot past me. I kind of thought it through a little bit.
yeah, and you're on the saw stop, but man, that's a pants changer for sure. I don't know how dangerous this mistake is, but it's embarrassing. I'm going to mention it. Is that I had for a long time I thought the higher the tooth count and the more expensive the blade, the better it is. And so for a long time, I mean, until last year, I had a 60 or 80 tooth count blade in my table saw, and yet 95% of the cuts I did were ripping. And I just thought, well, no, I don't want the 24 tooth blade. I want the fine finish 80 tooth blade because that's better. It's going to give me a better finish. And no one had taught me
Right.
grain direction, the gullets, that you actually get a better cut with a 24. And so I had this blade for 6 years. I was getting burning on all of my cut. Like everything was burnt.
Yeah.
It was dull. It was dirty. And I can't believe I didn't get a kickback or anything with this blade.
Right.
So now I'm a big believer of like, get the right blade, make sure it's sharp, make sure it's clean.
Yeah.
But I think I escaped some accidents.
We have a saw sharpening blade company nearby here in Hudson, New York. It's called Dinosaw, and I bring them like a suitcase full of blades, and then they give them back with the gel on the edges. So I get back like a whole stack of blades. It's been a minute, but when I'm ready to do something new, I always break out a brand new blade. Brand new meaning new sharpened blade. So just like the old days, my dad used to come home all the time with all the blades sharpened with the gel on the tips. That it's like a new sharpened blade.
Yeah. That's one
like
thing I
that.
hate is like going to Home Depot, buying a Diablo blade, and as soon as you're throwing it away, it's like, man, if you could spend the same money on a CMT blade and you can sharpen that thing for a decade. And like
I get
save the
all my blades
landfill.
sharpened, even like the old Diablo blades. I get them all sharpened. I noticed the Diablo
Yeah.
blades. This might be just me. Some of them are too skinny for the saw stop because they don't fit the riving knife. Diablo blades are thinner than the riving
Yep.
knife, and that becomes
Yep.
a problem.
Yeah, the Diablo blades I haven't tried to sharpen them, but the carbide on them looks paper thin compared
Yeah.
to the CMT ones that are the same price basically.
Mm-hmm.
But I was reading my saw stop manual really closely, and it was like, don't use thin curved blades because the brakes aren't calibrated for. You can't guarantee it's
Right.
going to stop fast enough because
Yeah.
I only use full curve now,
Mm-hmm.
and but with a 3 horsepower 220 volt. It's
I have the
like
7
butter.
horsepower, 3-phase.
I thought I didn't know. I knew they made a 5. I didn't know they made a 7.
It might be a 5 or a 7. I think it's a 5.7 or it's a
It's
7.5.
the industrial version. The industrial line.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed because your thing is opposite of mine. Did they give that to you, or did you
did.
get it?
They did. Because I'm the Mac. They gave me the one in the city. And it's funny because I did a video, my table saw tips video, where I just talk about my accident. And you could see more. You could steal any of that footage. You could see explicitly I show it on the saw how I got hurt. I did that video, and then it wasn't until I did that video that I reached out from Matt Howard at Saw Stop, and he goes, hey, look, all your fans are badgering me to give you a Saw Stop. He goes, to be perfectly honest, he goes, I thought you're an ass, and you were acting like a jackass on the saw, so I didn't want you representing us. He goes, but after watching it, he goes, I realized the experience you actually do have and the level of comfort you have. He goes, you'd be a good test case to basically say, this idiot needs a table saw, even though he knows that he thinks he knows everything. So he said it in a very complimentary way, like you have a lot of experience and you got injured just because you're overconfident. He goes, you're the perfect guy for a saw stop. So they sent me that one,
that's
and then
awesome.
when the high-powered one came out, and he knew I had a bigger shop up here, he goes, do you mind if we send you the new? I think it's 7. Maybe I'm wrong.
You
Maybe it's-
mind?
he goes,
Do you
"Can we
mind?
Yeah, I was like, sure, send it. But when it showed up, I didn't have 3-phase, and so I never plugged it. It sat unplugged in for 2 years until I finally got 3-phase electric. Because you can't run the saw stops on a phase converter. You can't run a 3-phase because the electrical, configurable, the electrical circuitry gets weird on a. They don't recommend you run it on a phase converter
Interesting.
because the braking system It's also sensitive. The electromagnetic gizmosity.
That's right. Yeah, that would make sense because it's using the current. For a long time, I wanted a saw stop, but I didn't get one because of the comments of just thinking of Stan from New Jersey. Oh, must be nice, whatever. And one day, and I've got 3 small boys, and one day I'm filming myself, wondering, am I in focus? And I'm using my table saw, and I was like, you know what? If I were to have an accident, Stan from New Jersey isn't responsible and is not going to feed my kids
Right.
and is not going to deal. Why am I continuing to take this risk because of some hypothetical troll who has a jealousy problem?
Yeah. I say it all the time. I use the most
I got one.
expensive, best possible tools I can grab my hands on. And I have, I have a hard on for antique tools. So 3-phase stuff, if you could stall it, I hate it. If you can't stall it, that's bad. If you could rip your arm off and you could still be standing in your same footprints, then that's what I want.
Yeah, I look at it as an insurance policy.
Yeah.
And yeah, but it's sat, I put it together and I didn't use it for about 3 weeks because it was just so pretty.
Yeah.
And I was like, I don't want to, this top is perfect. I don't want to put sawdust on it. So now it has sawdust on it, but
well, you should see
so cute.
both of my saw tops. Aaron, unfortunately, my old assistant who passed away, Aaron he used to drive him crazy that I don't want coffee stains on my top, and I don't want beer can stains on my top. I don't drink beer, but sometimes people walk in with a soda and they put it down, and I'm not around to yell at them. But I gave up on getting upset about it because sometimes you just can't control it. I have too many people wandering through here. But Aaron would always make sure the tabletops were crystal clear. Now I glue up on them, and I'm like,
oh my word!
It's easier to get the glue off when it's dry. I'll wait till it dries, and then it leaves a bunch of stains.
Oh my gosh! Well, you could polish. You could, you could clean it up, and I just put carbon method stuff on mine. And
I see that. Yeah, that's cool stuff.
It looks like brand new, and they have this glide spray you put on. It's like air hockey.
Yeah,
it's crazy. It is so slick. It's unreal.
Yeah, I saw Chris Burton has it on his too.
Yeah. That's how I learned about it. It was from Chris, and
I just sprinkle some sawdust on it. It gives it a little bit of a glide.
Some blood.
The fine sawdust out of the palm sand, it gives it the same. It's like a tabletop hockey game.
Okay, so can we talk about the real story? How did your chickens get murdered?
Oh yeah, well this morning I came out. It's a shame. I think it must have happened early this morning. I didn't close my coop last night, but then again, I don't close my coop often. I've been very lucky. I know I was pushing my luck, and this morning, I just looked out having coffee and I see a big gaggle of feathers, and that's not a good sign. So I walk over and I see another big gaggle of feathers, and I'm like, oh boy, and I could tell that they're the rooster, the tail feathers of my big rooster. And then me and my friend was sitting here having coffee and we're watching, and the hawk. I'm like, there's the hawk, and he's zeroing in out in I got a big pasture. It's almost a 1 acre pasture, and he's zeroing in the middle of the pasture. And I was like, and then I climb up on the fence, and just as I lean up on the horse fence, I see 3 birds fly away from a little puff out in the middle of the pasture. So I walk out there, and it's my rooster and another chicken, like a 6 or 7 year old chicken. That's just one of the first ones I got. Yeah, dead.
Was
no
it
head?
The hawk?
Must have been the hawk because they don't have a head. I think the hawk goes for the head first.
Wow.
Neither one of them had a head. It was like a horror movie.
Oh no.
So yeah, I lost my he was the main guy. He's been around here for about 4 years. He was the main rooster. He ran everything. So now there's 2 more roosters. They're gonna have to step up.
Now there's a leadership vacuum.
Oh yeah, and the girls don't know what to do. They're all like, "Where's our guru?" He walks around with a long linen shirt on. Our guru is gone.
Well, dude, thanks for sharing your story. I'm gonna go get lunch at Chick-fil-A, but I really appreciate.
Thanks for all your help lately. I really appreciate it.